Shalom, WJC family. It is time for our weekly Torah talk. This week in Shul, we will be reading Parshat Va'era, the second portion in the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus. And this is where the story really gets going. We'll read about Moshe going to Pharaoh and bringing the first 7 of the 10 plagues. And one of the most famous features, the most notable features of this story about the plagues is what God says to Moses he is going to do multiple times, actually, last week in the story of the burning bush, and again in chapter 7 in Parsha Va'era. God says, Va'ani akshe et lev paro, right? I will harden, toughen, make kasher, right, difficult Pharaoh's heart, and thus I may multiply my signs and marvels in the land of Egypt. This is a highly controversial statement. It draws us in. How can Pharaoh be punished if God is hardening his heart? And there have been so many interpretations of exactly what this means. The idea that God would harden our hearts, make it difficult to repent, is bothersome. One explanation that I find rather compelling is that really Pharaoh's heart is already pretty hard, right? He's been acting with such cruelty, right? Committing genocide to the Jewish people and delightedly mistreating all of his population, that his heart's already hard. That this is as much a description of Pharaoh's heart as it is something that God is going to do to him. Like God is going to highlight the hardness of his heart. But today, as we talk about the awful things that can happen to your heart, I actually want to talk about something different, something I think that is even worse, maybe, than the hardening of the heart, although maybe we shouldn't compare such things. I want to highlight something that happens to Yaakov, to Jacob, at the end of the book of Genesis. Just a couple of parshas ago, we read about Jacob, and he's, if you recall, stays in the land of Canaan. The brothers discover Joseph is alive. They come back, and they tell him Joseph is still alive. He's the ruler of the whole land of Egypt. And what are we told? Vayafog libo ki lo ha'emin lahem. That Jacob's vayafog libo, his heart was numb. Ki lo ha'emin lahem, because that he couldn't believe them. He didn't believe them. And this idea that the heart can become numb is something I've just been thinking about a lot for the last week. You know, on the one hand, there's a lot of awful things happening in the world, happening in our country. Politics have been wild, and attacks on the Capitol, and a second impeachment of the president. That has captured our attention very, very much. At the very same time, right, there are some 4,000 people dying every day from the COVID-19 virus. And I don't hear a lot of people speaking about that. Why is that? And I'm afraid that maybe vayafog libenu, that our hearts have become numb. That after hearing these horrific numbers day in and day out, after hearing lies or experiencing cruelty day in and day out, after having our attention drawn, look over here, no, look over here, no, look over here, that we've lost sight of the most important thing, which is life. And now the numbers are approaching 400,000. You know, when 4,000 people are dying a day, 3,500, 4,000 people dying every day, that's almost 30,000 a week, right? That means that 100,000 number is ticking up in less than a month. Another 100,000 people dead from this awful disease. Why are we not talking about it? And I am afraid it is because our hearts have become numb. Right? We haven't been looking at what is most important. I understand all these different things are related. But where should our attention be focused? And I think the Torah is telling us when it says, Akshe lev Paro, I will harden Pharaoh's heart. It's saying you need to be paying attention to the reality of how lives are being affected, right? The reason why Pharaoh seems to merit having his heart hardened, deserve it, is because he's so cruel already. He doesn't see the value of life. He doesn't see that the most important thing that a person can do is to protect, to help save the lives of others. And so too with us. Not that our hearts are cruel, but I'm afraid our hearts are numb, that we are missing as well that reality. In our own parsha, there's another sense of this numbness. Although I'm reticent to even share this idea, but at the very beginning of the portion, right, God is speaking to Moses, and God says, you should know, Ani shamati et na'akat b'nei Yisrael. I've heard the moaning of the Israelites because the Egyptians are holding them in bondage. That's great, except they've been in bondage for over 100 years. Did they just start moaning now? Of course not. Was God's heart numb to the outcries of God's people? It's hard to accept that as a reality, but that's another question that we are faced with. Where is God during the period of slavery? One explanation for that is that God is with the people in exile. Right, we're told when Jacob goes down to Egypt, God says, I will be with you. And we learn from that when we are in exile, God is with us. It feels a little like we're in exile now. Although we're happy that a vaccine is starting to be distributed, we're still completely rocked by this pandemic. And it is our job to make sure we do not become numb to the outcries, the pain of people, that we don't become so distracted by issues that just aren't as important. They're important, hugely important, powerfully important. Right? What happens to the government of the United States is important, but only vis-a-vis the idea that people, real people, you and me and our neighbors and our communities are affected by it. When we lose sight of that, when we stop checking every day to see the number of Americans who died from COVID-19, the number of people who are suffering because of unemployment, because of not enough room at hospitals, because the beds are being taken up by COVID-19 patients, to notice all the cruelty around us and to be motivated to help. When our hearts are numb, that is a dangerous situation. As we read about Pharaoh's hard heart and heavy heart, we should remember that our job is not to allow our hearts to be heavy, to be hard. That our job is not to allow ourselves to be numbed by the bombardment of tragedy, the incomprehensibility of the numbers, but instead to pay close attention. And if God is in exile with us, to harness that spiritual energy to help and to make a difference. I know it's been a crazy political season. I hope everyone went and voted. And I hope that we can all accept that period of the vote is over and that we can move forward now. Civic duty having been done, it's time to do our neighborly duty. It's time to help others. Help others find their way to access this vaccine, which is not all that easy. Find ways to help others who are suffering because they've lost work, income, access to food, access to health care. That's our job. That's our role. Let us make sure we continue to feel, despite how painful it is right now, and inspired by those feelings, we go out and we help others. If God is in exile with us, That's why, to remind us of our role in all of this. I know the temptation to have a numb heart because it just hurts so much. But we can't end up like Pharaoh. We can't harden ourselves. Let's use this moment when we are needed so much to go out and to make a difference and to help in this world that so desperately needs our help.